I'm Alex, nice to meet you. If you're new here, then welcome. Thanks for finding my little corner of the internet. Since it's the month of Halloween, because Halloween is an entire month, I thought that I would compile a little stack of recommendations that go along with the vibe for this month. Some spooky, haunted, mystery type books. I want to mention before I give my list that I realized that this list isn't super diverse after I made it. So if you guys have any recommendations, then please recommend them in the comments. I would love more suggestions and I would love to see what you guys recommend. Other than that, I have a nice pile, I think of 6 books, and then I'm also going to share 2 books that I hope to read this October. The first book on my list is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. I'm sure a lot of you have probably heard of the show, or at least seen the show, and you probably heard of Shirley Jackson. She's one of the biggest writers in like gothic horror fiction type deal. I haven't seen the TV show because I scare extremely easily, though I have seen The Haunting of Bly Manor, which I think is loosely based on The Turn of the Screw, which I haven't read, but I've heard good things about. This was not as scary as I expected it to be, probably because most of what I heard about The Haunting of Hill House was from people who have seen the show, and I'm assuming the show is a lot scarier because of all the visual and auditory effects. But yeah, someone who gets very easily afraid of things that go bump in the night, I didn't find this book too bad. It definitely has its scarier moments, and I found that the scariest parts of the book were the anticipation, like you're just waiting for something to happen, and you're waiting to understand a certain aspect of the book or what just happened. And there were times where I just had to like close the book because I was like, I'm not ready to see what happens next. Because there's so much buildup that you're like, what's gonna happen? Like, what's gonna happen to these people? Pretty much it's about a bunch of young people who are invited to Hill House to take part of a study. And these people aren't told much about Hill House or its history, though it is locally known to potentially be haunted. And these people are asked to recount anything that they witness, anything that they experience while they remain at Hill House. It's really interesting because the main character, it kind of follows her spiral into madness the longer she stays in Hill House. And you as a reader kind of take part in that spiral because there's a lot of memory and confusion, so things aren't very reliable. And you're just like, hold on, I don't trust this character anymore. And then you're like, no, I definitely trust this character. And then it's like, no, wait, this character is definitely evil and out to get us because you are the main character, if you want to be. This is getting to be a very strange description. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading her other work. I definitely want to read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, I think it's called, and The Lottery. I don't know much about either, other than The Lottery is apparently one of the scariest short stories ever, so I'm looking forward to that. I just put a hold on the library. I actually think my copy arrived, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I like Shirley Jackson's style of writing, and this was definitely a quick book despite my need to put it down multiple times. But yeah, I really do recommend it, and sorry for the ugly movie tie-in copy that I have. Next up is a book that I found a few years ago, and I was just really drawn in by the cover. I didn't know much about it. This is the first cover for it that I saw. I saw it at a little bookstore in the town that I was living in at the time, and I was just really intrigued by the title. I really like the cover, you know, it kind of looks like an old beat up book, and it very much gave me Stranger Things vibes, and that was during the time that there was still a lot of hype around the show, and I really liked it. I still want to say that I really like it. And that's The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. This is a Canadian book, I'd like to say, which is pretty cool. It's set in the Niagara Falls area. It's set in the 80s, and it follows this ghost club that is led throughout the summer by Jake Baker's Uncle Calvin, who owns a odd little shop called the Oculatorium, and it has things from teas that can make you see the dead in your dreams to something called the Bat Phone, which is where he gets all his supernatural local information and news. It was a really lovely book. I love Craig Davidson's style of writing and storytelling. It details a lot about what it's like to be a kid growing up, and it follows a lot of in the theme of grief and memory and truth, which is super interesting. I read that Craig Davidson's writing is compared a lot to Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote Choke and Fight Club and other stuff. I haven't read enough of either of them to actually give my opinion on that. I only read part of Choke, which I just wasn't a fan of. However, I will say that I think Davidson's writing is a lot less vulgar and suggestive. I don't know, so if that's something that was putting you off of reading any of his books or any of his books under his pen names, don't let it, at least for this book, because I didn't see that much of a correlation between their writing in terms of that aspect, the suggestiveness, the vulgarness of Palahniuk's writing, which is fine for some people. I just don't personally like it that much. It still has its moments in this book, but they're really well done. And I loved the friendship aspect of this, and I really liked the flashback and the way the story was told, and both of these covers are fantastic. And this is a really quick read. I read it in like a day, and I made a lot of notes and markings in my book. I was really happy to find it when I did, and it's just a perfect read for this season. So definitely check that out. Next is a book that probably a lot of you heard about last year when the movie came out on Netflix, and that's I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Iain Reid. I read this like a year ago, or over a year ago now, and I still have a hard time expressing how I feel about this book and what I think about this book. I watched the movie directed by Charlie Kaufman first, and then I decided to pick this up and read it. I'd like to say that if you have seen the movie and you haven't read the book yet, the movie is Kaufman's interpretation of the story. And I think that this is very interpretable, and it really depends on the reader's perspective of the story. So just because you've seen the movie doesn't mean you've spoiled anything in the book, which is what I was afraid of. They're very different to each other, and I kind of see them as separate entities. However, this is quite the book to digest. It's, without giving away too much, it tells the story of this woman who goes on a road trip in the middle of winter with her new boyfriend to go visit his family at their farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. And things go from just kind of baseline uncomfortable to downright nightmarish so quickly, and this is such a complex psychological thriller in the sense that it, like, so much happens, and it delves into so many themes of like grief and loss and missed opportunity and all that. It's very interesting. I highly recommend it. It's a hard book to swallow, that's for sure. And I also read this one really quick in a day or two, because you just can't put it down. You have to know what happens next, because every event is just weirder and more unsettling than the other. Yeah, so this is a good read for the season and a good movie for the season too. Next up is a book that is probably a classic by now, and that's Coraline by Neil Gaiman. When I saw the movie like 10 years ago, because yes, I'm that old, I did not know that it was a book, and I loved the movie, even though a lot of my friends were just so scared and so put off by it, but I was like immediately obsessed with it, and I was very, very happy to learn that I could spend more time in the world through the book. I only read the book recently. I read it last October, And it's excellent. It's a middle grade story, but it can be read by anyone and appreciated by anyone, of course. Neil Gaiman is an incredible storyteller, and he's really great at inventing new stories and concepts that are just like, man, I really want to see the inside of your head. And of course, it's about this girl called Coraline who her parents uproot her life and move her to this middle of nowhere town in this weird old falling apart house. One night she goes on an adventure and she discovers this tiny little door that leads to this hallway or this tunnel. And the tunnel leads to her life, and it's the same as the life she lives now, except better. And she has the other mother and her other father, and all the food is amazing and everything is so fantastical and wonderful. Or is it? I cannot urge you enough to read it because it's fabulous, and I love middle grade fiction. If you love the movie, there's no way you wouldn't love the book. Next up is a book that's not that spooky, but it definitely is atmospheric, and I don't know, it just fits in with the energy of this month, this Halloween month. And that's The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. It's about this circus that just shows up. No announcements were made. It's just, it was not there one day and it was there the next. And it only runs during the night, and it's filled with all kinds of magical goings on and delicious treats. It's also the playground for a duel between two magicians, magical people, wizards. What are they? Young magicians. Say my notes. It's a love story. It's an appreciation for the finer things, and it's very magical and very atmospheric and very fallish in my opinion. So I think it's a good book for spooky month. And then I'd like to recommend volume 1 of Locke and Key by Joe Hill. It's called Welcome to Lovecraft. I just want to say that I'm only talking about volume 1 here. I loved volume 1. I thought it was fabulous. The rest of the series is interesting, but there were aspects of it that kind of went downhill for me. So all my praise goes towards volume 1, which is a very original story with great illustrations. However, I will trigger warning that they can get kind of gory and graphic at times. Pretty much it tells the story of the Locke siblings who moved to Lovecraft with their mom after their father was murdered by one of his students. One day when one of the younger siblings is adventuring around the property and just looking for something to do, he comes across a well on the property, and in this well he meets Echo, who lives in the well. But Echo is trapped, so Echo tells the young boy, whose name I forget, about the keys of Lovecraft. All kinds of stuff happens and falls apart, and it just gets crazy and chaotic after that. And it's really well done. I think it's a brilliant story, and I think it's very original. And I highly recommend volume 1. And no, I don't recommend the TV show because I don't think it's good. It's made into kind of a children's show, which I just don't think applies to this horror fantasy graphic novel at all. Future Alex here. I just wanted to add another recommendation that I completely forgot about, and I'm really mad that I forgot about it because it's like one of the best graphic novels I've ever read. And that's Into the Woods by Emily Carroll, and it's also illustrated by them. Oh my god, it's so good. It's like 5 or 6 short stories that are told in the graphic novel form, and they're all just fairy tale-esque spooky stories. Yeah, every story is scarier than the last. The first story I was like, okay, this is pretty scary, and then like by the end of it, I was super spooked, and I read it first thing in the morning. But yeah, the art is great. It's also definitely very scary, and I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on a physical copy because I only read the ebook copy on my phone, but I kind of want to get a full sense of the art and a full experience. So yeah, that should definitely be number 1 on your spooky month book list. And finally, for my TBR, I will hopefully have the time to read both of these. And I have Perfume by Patrik Suskind on my list. I've had this for a while. My sister gifted it to me about a year ago. And it's set in 18th century Paris, I believe, in the slums of Paris. And there's this orphaned man who has a keen sense of smell. And he is adamant on creating the perfect scent, which leads him to commit a whole string of murders. And it's a controversial novel, but I'm curious to read it. And as I said in my last video, censorship is bad. All books should be available to people to experience and critique. Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens in this, and I'm excited to read it. And the second book that I want to read, which I've already started, I've borrowed it from my boyfriend, and I already know that it's going to cause me to lose an insane amount of sleep, and I'll probably never be able to sleep with the lights off again. Oof. That's House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And this is a really interesting book because of the format that it's written in. It has a really interesting layout. It has, words that are colorful, and it's just written in a very unconventional manner, which is cool. So yeah, I'm excited to read that, though terrified. I've already started. And it's based on a documentary, which is fictitious, or not, about this family that moves from their house in the city into this small country home, which is much larger on the inside, impossibly larger on the inside than it appears to be on the outside. So, as I've said, I love a good book where one of the characters is a house, and obviously I recommended a lot of those in this video. So yeah, that's all for today. Those are all my recommendations in my short little TBR. Usually I read more books in the month, but I'm just trying to be realistic since grad school is picking up. If you guys have any recommendations, as I've said, please leave them in the comments. I would love to hear your suggestions and get more spooky recs to read. Like this video if you like this video, subscribe if you want to see more of my content, and I'll see you next time. Bye!